Hollywood gave you laughs and legends, but the real story was blood, panic, and men begging for their lives. When Henry Hill walked out of that courthouse in 1980 and disappeared into witness protection, Hollywood gave you a man who drove away into a quiet suburban life, irritated about his egg noodles and ketchup. What the cameras didn't show you was what the FBI files documented over the next 3 decades. Hill was relocated more than 20 times. 20. Each move triggered by his own inability to stop living the only life he ever knew. He was arrested for drug trafficking in 1987 in Washington state, just years after becoming the government's most prized mob informant. He was thrown out of witness protection entirely, a rare and damning distinction that the U.S. Marshals Service almost never exercises. Nicholas Pileggi, the journalist who wrote the book Wise Guy that became Goodfellas, was himself candid in interviews that Hill's post-mob existence was not a quiet tragedy, but a grinding, chaotic collapse. Hill dealt cocaine openly. He called reporters. He appeared on Howard Stern. He sold pasta sauce with his name on it. He was simultaneously trying to monetize his infamy, while federal agents watched him self-destruct in real time. Court records from his 1987 arrest in Spokane detail a man still moving product with the casual confidence of someone who genuinely believed consequences were for other people. He died in June 2012 in a Los Angeles hospital, largely alone, his body destroyed by decades of substance abuse. The men he testified against had either died in prison or been released and rebuilt their lives. Henry Hill died with nothing. The film's closing monologue, Hill staring into the camera, lamenting the loss of the life, was Scorsese's masterstroke of irony. But it was also, in a very real sense, a mercy the real story never received. The legend was always cleaner than the man. On December 11, 1978, a crew connected to the Lucchese crime family walked into the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK Airport and removed approximately $5 million in cash and jewelry. It remains one of the largest cash robberies in American history. The FBI launched one of its most intensive investigations of the era, and then, almost immediately, the witnesses started disappearing. Not metaphorically, physically, permanently. Within months of the heist, FBI homicide investigators began connecting a string of murders directly to the robberies' aftermath. Parnell Edwards, one of the getaway drivers, was found shot to death. Stax Edwards, whose failure to dispose of a stolen van was considered a catastrophic breach, was murdered in his apartment. Louis Cafora and his wife Joanna vanished entirely, never found. Robert McMahon and his partner Joseph Marazita were killed. Martin Krugman, who had initially tipped off Jimmy Burke to the heist opportunity, disappeared within weeks. Bodies were turning up in car trunks, in dumpsters, wrapped in plastic in lots across Queens and Brooklyn. FBI field reports from the period describe investigators scrambling to keep pace with a cleanup operation that was moving faster than the investigation itself. Jimmy Burke, fictionalized as Jimmy Conway in the film, was systematically eliminating every human link to the money. In Goodfellas, this is rendered as a darkly comedic montage, faces crossed out, quick cuts, few scenes of paranoid men sensing something is wrong. What the film cannot convey is the documented scale of the terror those men lived in during those final weeks. These were not abstract mob statistics. They were men who had participated in a score, expected a payday, and instead spent their last days looking over their shoulders at every car that slowed down near them. Money was never fully recovered. Most of the men who touched it were. Joe Pesci's Tommy DeVito is one of cinema's great portraits of volatility. Funny, then terrifying, then funny again, until suddenly someone is dead. It earned Pesci an Academy Award, but law enforcement records and FBI informant testimony about the real Tommy DeSimone described something the screen could not contain, and a mainstream audience in 1990 could not have been shown. DeSimone was not merely unpredictable. Investigators and former associates who spoke to authorities described a man who killed with a frequency and a casualness that placed him in a category beyond what Hollywood defines as a villain. The murders depicted in the film, Billy Bat's, Spider, were real. They represented a fraction of the violence attributed to DeSimone in federal records and in grand jury testimony. He is suspected in the deaths of multiple individuals whose cases were never formally closed. More critically, the manner of his violence was documented as involving prolonged physical brutality, not the quick, almost slapstick killings the film portrays. When DeSimone disappeared in January 1979, officially to be made as a full member of the Gambino family, investigators and mob historians have long believed the reality was starkly different. The Gambino family, under Paul Castellano, had not forgiven DeSimone for the unauthorized killing of Billy Batts, a made man whose murder required official sanction that was never given. What happened in that room and what preceded it has never been fully established in the public record. But former federal prosecutors who worked organized crime cases in New York during that period have stated in interviews that the intelligence they received suggested DeSimone's final hours were not quick. Some men are too dangerous to be made, and too dangerous to be left alive. One of Goodfellas' most carefully constructed myths is the idea that Paul Vario, fictionalized as Paul Cicero, operated as a principled patriarch who drew a hard line against narcotics. The film frames Henry Hill's drug dealing as a personal betrayal, a violation of the boss's explicit code. It is a dramatically satisfying arc. It is also, according to FBI RICO investigation records and federal court testimony from multiple cooperating witnesses, largely fiction. The Lucchese family's involvement in narcotics during the 1970s was not a secret kept from leadership. It was a revenue stream that leadership was acutely aware of and, in documented cases, actively facilitated. Federal prosecutors building RICO cases against the Lucchese family during this period compiled testimony establishing that the narcotics network Hill operated within was not a rogue operation run by street-level associates acting against orders. It was tolerated, taxed, and in specific instances, directed from above. The no drugs rule that permeated mob mythology served a very specific purpose. It was legal insulation. If a boss could claim ignorance, claim he had explicitly forbidden narcotics, then federal conspiracy charges became harder to make stick. It was not a moral position. It was a litigation strategy. Vario himself was convicted in 1984 on charges related to a ticket-fixing scheme. But federal investigators who worked the Lucchese case have stated publicly that the narcotics intelligence they developed painted a far more comprehensive picture of organizational involvement than whatever reached a courtroom. The drug trade generated tens of millions of dollars annually across the New York families during this period. The idea that bosses of that era were insulated from that revenue by genuine principle has been systematically dismantled by 3 decades of RICO prosecutions, cooperating witness testimony, and declassified FBI surveillance records. The code was never about morality. It was about deniability. Karen Hill in Goodfellas is one of cinema's most unusual protagonists. A woman drawn into the gravitational pull of mob life, who narrates her own complicity with a kind of dark, self-aware humor. Lorraine Bracco's performance is extraordinary, but the FBI debriefing records of the real Karen Hill and the investigative journalism that followed in the years after the film's release reveal a story of sustained psychological complexity that the film compresses into something far more palatable. Karen Hill was subjected to documented domestic violence throughout her marriage. Henry Hill's abuse was not an undercurrent. It was a recurring, documented reality that Karen herself addressed in interviews years after the film's release. Frustrated that Scorsese's version had softened or omitted it almost entirely. Beyond the violence, Karen was utilized as a drug courier. She physically transported narcotics on behalf of Henry's operation, fact established in federal records. Her awareness of criminal activity, including her proximity to information about murders, placed her in a position of legal jeopardy that the film's framing as darkly comic codependence entirely obscures. In 1980, when Hill became a government witness, Karen faced an agonizing and genuinely dangerous choice. one that affected her children, her safety, and her own potential criminal exposure. The real Karen Hill was not a punchline or a foil. She was a woman who had been drawn into a criminal organization through marriage, had been victimized within it, had participated in it, and was then asked to dismantle her entire life based on the decisions of a man who had already destroyed it. Behind every man in that life was a woman the credits never properly named. Goodfellas is a masterpiece. That is not the argument. Scorsese's film remains one of the most technically brilliant, narratively hypnotic pieces of American cinema ever committed to celluloid. But mastery of craft is not the same as fidelity to truth. And when a film becomes the primary lens through which an entire generation understands organized crime in America, the distance between what was shown and what actually happened begins to carry weight. The real Lucchese crime family was not a brotherhood of charismatic outlaws living large on the margins of society. It was a criminal organization that murdered people to protect money, destroyed families including its own, and that left a trail of bodies, broken witnesses, and shattered lives stretching across decades of FBI files and federal court records. The men at the center of it were not tragic heroes undone by ambition. They were perpetrators, and the people closest to them paid prices the camera rarely lingered on. Henry Hill died, relocated, addicted, and forgotten. Tommy DeSimone died in a room somewhere in New York before he ever received the honor he was God promised. The Lufthansa millions vanished, and the men who earned them vanished with them. Karen Hill rebuilt a life from wreckage that was never entirely hers to begin with. And Paul Vario died in federal prison in 1988, far from the quiet authority the film granted him. The truth about organized crime in America is not a movie. It does not have a soundtrack. It does not end with a knowing look into the camera. It ends in courtrooms, in hospitals, in unmarked graves, and in the testimonies of people who survived by agreeing to tell the government everything. That is the film nobody greenlit, because that one doesn't let you look away feeling anything close to entertained.